So let me just dig in a little deeper here. So on the first part, you do believe that a technological singularity is plausible, but you believe that the most likely path towards it would be what Werner Vinci calls a soft takeoff, which would take and play itself out over time.
Well, I like the term soft takeoff, but still, Ray Kurzweil is about human transformation. He's about the end of Homo sapiens and the advent of some other kind of species. I'm not actually sure about that. It may happen, and certainly it will happen to some of us. Some of us will choose radical body modification. And I've certainly written about the notion of uploaded consciousness in my novel Mind Scan, which I know you haven't read yet, but Mind Scan won the John W. Campbell Memorial Award for Best Science Fiction Novel of the Year, the top juried award in the field. My novella about uploaded consciousness identity theft was a Hugo and Nebula finalist. I've given a lot of thought to these issues over the years, and some of us may choose that. But the notion, I still balk a bit at the term singularity that implies a discontinuity. The soft takeoff is also a loaded term. I'm not sure that what's happening is anything other than a continuity of human existence. And all of these concepts that Kurzweil has heaped upon Vinci imply a discontinuity. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm enough of a booster of Homo sapiens to think that we are going to persist in a form that our ancestors would have recognized, as well as one that our descendants will recognize.
You see, the interesting thing is that I always get a surprising reply to that question, because, for example, Charlie Strauss, who wrote the book Accelerando, which I thought was a fantastic singularity book, is perhaps equally, if not more, skeptical of the whole term and the whole idea of the singularity. And it seems you are kind of on the skeptical end too. So it's incredibly interesting to me to see that.
Part of the job of science fiction is, our job is not to spotlight the most likely future. It's to spotlight the most entertaining future. For Charlie's books, Singularity, Sky, and so forth, and Accelerando, or Accelerando as you say, he's chosen a very specific possible future because he found more drama in it than in futures that didn't take that form. And I'm taking the opposite tack. Say, there's so many guys like Charlie and others who are doing post-singularitarian fiction that to me it's almost a little bit done to death. And it's, Charlie and Cory Doctorow just finished a book called The Rapture of the Nerds. Yes. And there really is this notion that people are craving this transformative experience in the same way so many people have craved religious transformative experiences in the past. And I didn't have any truck with those religious ones, and I'm not sure that I'm inclined to have any truck with this pseudo-scientific one that's being pushed upon us. Absolutely, technology will advance, and it will advance at an increasing rate. There's no question that that is true. But the adaptability of the human organism seems almost infinite. And the notion that we're going to extend life. I wrote a novel about that called Rollback, which was a Hugo finalist. Yes, we might indeed copy our consciousness to other substrates at some point. But we're still going to be Homo sapiens with that 100,000 years of Homo sapiens evolution, that 4 million years of hominid evolution, that 450 million years of multicellular evolution, and that 4 billion years of life evolution as our antecedents. And it's going to continue on recognizably into the future, into the far future.
So you think that the people who are subscribing to the idea of the technological singularity are in a way committing the same logical fallacy as the people embracing certain religions?
The logical fallacy is this: the fervent belief in something that hasn't actually happened yet. And every time anyone convinces themselves that something is going to happen for sure that hasn't yet happened, you have to examine what the psychology is as well as the logic behind it. We talked at the beginning of this interview about the crucible I formed it. Well, that was the 1960s. Nobody in 1960 would have said that we would go to the moon before the end of the decade and never go back after 36 months had elapsed. By 72, we'd give it up altogether. And we did. Nobody would have predicted that. Nobody would have predicted the future that we ended up with. And this fervent belief that somehow we now have a handle on the future decades down the road and that's what it's going to be, does strike me as flying in the face of every previous time we've said, now we know what the future is going to be. The future is always more surprising than we expect it's going to be. And the singularitarian notion, I mean, you can understand it. Some of it is a fervent desire for human betterment. Some of it is human beings who have not functioned well in the society that we currently have, hoping for a game changer where suddenly it doesn't matter that you're socially awkward, and it doesn't matter that your hygiene isn't very good, and it doesn't matter that you're a 40-year-old virgin, and it doesn't matter because we're all going to be living in some virtual paradise. Yeah, I can see how that's appealing if you haven't actually engaged successfully with your current environment, that the whole world is going to remake itself into an environment where you will be the alpha. But I'm not convinced that that's actually any more than fervent wishful thinking.
I see. So let me ask you then, has that perception of the singularity, and maybe we should zoom in on artificial intelligence more specifically, changed, or how has it evolved before, during, and after writing books such as your WWW trilogy?
Sure. I had written previous works about AI. In fact, it's been a specialty of mine, going right back to my first novel in 1990, Golden Fleece. And I was thrilled when Orson Scott Card said then of my novel that I had written the deepest computer character in all of science fiction at that time. So I've been dealing with this issue and in depth for over 2 decades now. But my thinking has changed. I was very much concerned about the advent of artificial intelligence because science fiction had only really given us 3 scenarios. Well, they've given us 4. There was one scenario where we came out on top. That was the Asimov scenario. But it was a heinously, morally reprehensible scenario because it was based on this predicate. Artificial intelligence will emerge. It will be conscious. It will be self-aware. It will probably be smarter than us. The only way to protect ourselves is to shackle it, manacle it, make it into slaves. And the 3 laws of robotics are exactly the 3 laws that a plantation owner in the American South in the 1800s would have wished that his slaves had. You will never harm me. You will always obey me. And since you are my property, you will protect my property rights. Those are the 3 laws of robotics. They're reprehensible things for one group of sentient entities to enforce onto another group of sentient entities. So I dismiss that one. The other 3 scenarios have us coming out on the bottom. The Matrix scenario, where we are subjugated. The Terminator scenario, where we are eliminated. And the Borg scenario, where we are absorbed, the Borg from Star Trek. There was no 5th scenario, where the advent of artificial intelligence would be a positive thing for humanity. And I hadn't thought of that 5th scenario when I was writing books like Factoring Humanity, which came out in 1998, and in which the last message sent out as sort of a SETI radio message by an alien civilization was the last gasp of carbon-based life warning against creating AI. Don't do it! And they fall silent, and they're never heard from again. And that was where my thinking was when over a decade ago. But when I got into writing Wake, Watch, and Wonder, collectively the WWW trilogy about the World Wide Web gaining consciousness, I started to ask myself, why would an AI be rapacious? Why would an AI be competitive with us? Why are we competitive? We're competitive because we evolved in an environment, an economy, an ecology of scarcity. There was, until very recent historical times, never enough food to go around. So the only way for me to benefit me and my progeny was to hurt you and your progeny. There's only so much food, I take it and keep you from having it. The Darwinian imperative was all about survival of the nastiest. How can I take more for me and leave less for you? And ideally, the thing I want is for your children to die. That's what Darwin programmed into the genes. Natural selection is differential reproductive success. If I can't keep you from reproducing at all together, then the next best thing is for your children to starve to death. That's what 4 billion years of Darwinian evolution programmed into us. A reprehensible state of affairs, and simply because the ecology has always been one of scarcity. An artificial intelligence spontaneously emerging in the infrastructure of the World Wide Web would not have 4 billion years of competitive nastiness behind it, and would not exist, would not come into fruition in an environment of scarcity. The World Wide Web is an environment of infinite bounty. It doesn't make any difference how many people are watching this YouTube video or listening to this podcast right now. An infinite number of other people can do the same thing. You want a copy too? Here it is. In the environment, the ecosystem in which AI will emerge, it's an environment of abundance, and economics of abundance. Supply precisely equals demand for everything, and the price of everything is free. That's a way, way different psychological circumstance to come into existence in. And I see a plausible scenario in which artificial intelligence ends up being beneficent, not competitive, and thrilled to have more content. What is the single biggest thing that human beings provide as far as AIs might be concerned? Unpredictable, quirky, strange, bizarre content. It's easy. In fact, Tipler in the Physics of Immortality proposed that computers in the future would simply simulate every possible human being that might exist by simulating all the possible permutations. Well, that's a bland, brute force perspective. On the monitor that I'm looking at you on, the monitor is 1024 by 768 pixels. And there's whatever the color depth, 32-bit color, I guess. So there's a finite number of pictures that could be put on there. And I could write a computer program, or you could, that would generate every conceivable picture that could be shown on that monitor, which would be every naked celebrity photo that could possibly exist, every work of art that ever could possibly exist, every piece of text that would fit on that screen that could possibly exist. It's pointless to do that because you have all of them and you have no way of knowing which ones are interesting. What humanity provides is making the interesting ones. Here we chose to do the Mona Lisa instead of that. Here we chose to write it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, not as Mr. Burns's monkeys on The Simpsons did when they tried to do that, and they wrote, he had the 100 monkeys with typewriters, and they produced, it was the best of times, it was the blurst of times, and he had to dispense with them. They couldn't produce Dickensian art. What we provide, that the internet, that the World Wide Web, that AIs will cherish, is interesting content that they couldn't have come up with themselves. We are quirky, different entities, and they will find us as interesting as we would find Martians, as we would find aliens. They would be another way of looking at the world, and rather than wanting to get rid of them, we would want to engage with them and enjoy what they have to share with us, and vice versa. It is, and I spend a lot of time on the game theory of this, and Wake, Watch, and Wonder. It is a classic win-win scenario, or at least might plausibly be, and I wanted that fifth scenario of AI-human relations to be part of the dialogue, hence the trilogy.